everyone. I'm Jane. I'm glad to be a host here today. Welcome to this episode of ITAP Connect series, where we bring you insights through conversations with invited speakers, as well as opportunities to network and interact with a community of like-minded participants and industry peers. This series of web engagements is designed to address some of the top-of-mind issues and challenges faced by industries and businesses in this time of disruption and beyond. We are delighted to be collaborating with SAP to bring you this episode today. But before we go further, we'd like to run a quick audience poll with just 2 questions to get a better sense of your perspectives on digital transformation. You'll see a pop-up box in front of you now. Okay. So we'll let you work on that, but while we do that, let me bring on Graham Conlon from SAP, who will deliver our opening presentation to set the context for today's discussions. Graham is head of digital supply chain at SAP for Asia Pacific and Japan, where he heads the organization in sales execution, pipeline management, customer adoption, and delivering the next phase of growth for SAP's digital supply chain solutions in the region. He brings over 20 years experience, and in his most recent role, he heads the Global Digital Supply Chain Center of Excellence and is responsible for go-to-market strategy, new product introduction, and strategic customer engagement. With that, I'm glad to hand it over to Graham.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Jane. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for the opportunity to open up this session. I think what I had planned to do was to spend a little bit of time talking about some observations that I've made, talking to clients of SAP's all around the Asia Pacific and Japan region. So with that, let me just see if I can get some slides to move. I think in the current times, we spend a huge amount of time talking about COVID. We spend a huge amount of time talking about the disruption and the impact that that's had on our economies and our businesses. And what I really wanted to talk about was the fact that actually, whilst COVID is the most significant disruption that many of us can remember, actually, when we look at the situation, it's not the first, and it certainly won't be the last major disruption that we've had to deal with. If you think about only 18 months, a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about the massive impact, the massive disruption that trade wars had. Prior to that, we've had various financial crises. And therefore, I think what I've learned and what I've observed is that actually today, when we look at our businesses, we're actually in a constant position of disruption. It's just at the moment the disruption is much more obvious and perhaps much bigger. I think with that, many organizations are currently looking for mechanisms to try and deal with and mitigate against the risks of this disruption. And I think there's also a key point, and I'll come to it in a few moments, and why I believe it's so important. And that is, for many of us, we've been looking at the current situation of massive disruptions we've seen, and we've been looking at it from the perspective of this is a downturn in our environment. What I also want to flag up is that at a point in time, if you look at all of the other major disruptions, a couple I've referred to, we've always seen a recovery phase. And during that recovery phase, Asia's always come out of that recovery strong. And I want to just flag up that actually a recovery is just as big a disruption as a downturn, or it can be in significant recoveries. And therefore, organizations are currently looking at how do they digitize, how do they consider concepts like Industry 4.0 to make sure that they can cope during this downturn, but also they're in a position to thrive during the recovery. What we've also seen, talking to many organizations around the region, is that many organizations for some time now have had a transformation agenda. Many of them are looking at digital maturity and how they transform their business and grow their businesses. What we've seen in recent times, because the impact of COVID has had such a massive and visible change on supply chains, for many organizations, they're currently considering supply chain transformation as a priority within their broader digital transformation and the transformations of their businesses. And I think, therefore, what I'm seeing is a real focus around supply chain and the relationship between supply chain and Industry 4.0. Again, looking at these organizations, when they say we need to transform our supply chain, what are they looking to do? And I think many organizations, many people, many analysts talk about resilience in supply chain. And I think that's important. And I think organizations are looking to build toughness. They're looking to build supply chains that can recover. But the one thing I also want to mention is that with these disruptions, we never get back to where we were before. And it's more obvious this time than ever when people are using the expression new norm all the time. And therefore, as well as resilience and the ability to be tough and to cope and to have strong processes and practices within supply chains, you need a supply chain that is agile. It needs to be able to change, because post-disruption, new norm, the situation will not be the same. So for us, I think many of the clients that we talk to, they're really looking at how do we cope with all of this disruption? They're looking at how does supply chain and Industry 4.0 feature in the broader digital transformation of a company? And how do we establish resilience? And also, how do we build agility and flexibility into our practices and our processes? I think also it's worth mentioning, focusing specifically on the COVID topic, that when this first kicked in earlier in the year, everybody we talked to was really focused on how do we survive. They saw massive disruptions in demand. They saw massive fluctuations with lockdowns happening in different parts of the region. And everybody said, if we're going to survive, we've got to be efficient. And if we're going to survive, we've got to take cost out of supply chains and out of manufacturing practices. And actually, that whole discussion has really changed now. Organizations have been through that phase, and now they're starting to look forward to the recovery, and they're starting to figure out, how do we thrive through that process? How do we really grow our business? And often when you see massive disruptions, and particularly positive disruptions, organizations that are ready can really grab market share. Now, they don't always grab market share in a hugely profitable way, but they will grab market share if they're ready. And then as they move forward, as we all know, it takes a lot longer to win market share back than perhaps it does during periods of disruption when organizations can grab it quickly. Now, I also just want to say a few words about, again, the thinking of organizations. And today we're talking a little bit about Industry 4.0. And if you think all the way back to 2011, when I first came across Industry 4.0 in Germany, the focus right then was very much in factory. It was largely a manufacturing topic. It was about how do we automate. It was about how do we really drive huge advances within the walls of the factory, largely. And what we've seen right now is that actually it doesn't matter how good your factory is if you've got no raw materials to run through it. And it doesn't matter how good your factory and your manufacturing processes are if once you have some finished goods, you've got no mechanism to get them to your customers. So I think today, again, organizations are looking much, much more at a bigger and broader holistic view of what does Industry 4.0 mean, and also what does it really mean for the practices and processes within their organization. And for us here at SAP, we use the expression design to operate, and we talk about it in the context of those 5 pillars that you can see. And the idea here is that we're really thinking about, how do you design products? How would you then ultimately manufacture them? How do you move them? How do you operate the facilities, the plant that you need in order to manufacture? And at the whole time, how are you actually planning and understanding the impact on all of these different components? That's the way that we approach it, and that's what we see that is actually going on in the marketplace. One more point I would make, and that is, as well as the topics I just mentioned, it's not a linear process. And increasingly, when we start thinking holistic, it can't just be these processes within your company, within your organization. There are so many third parties. And in fact, today, many organizations are considering this not in the context of manufacturing, but in terms of a truly networked business with third-party players. So I think I mentioned that it needs to be holistic, and I think this is a great example that just proves that point. This is a quote that came from HP, and as you can imagine, it relates to the COVID situation. Many of us started working from home. Many of HP's products, they saw their demand shoot through the roof, as you can imagine, as more and more people needed to get their equipment in-house. And these guys talked about, they even, as well as the demand, they even had the inventory to support the demand, but then the bottleneck became transportation and logistics. And I think if that's not a great example of how you need to think of these logistically, I beg your pardon, holistically, then I don't know what better example I could give. I think it really highlights that supply chains, Industry 4.0 and supply chains are just like any other chain, and that is they really are only as strong as the weakest link. Now, we talked about HP. What I wanted to do was perhaps show you an example from an organization, Maven Group, a little bit closer to home. These guys are based in Vietnam. Let me just show the video. So again, I hope you can see demand was what was really impacted for the Maven Group's business, but it was the impact on inventory and their ability to continue manufacturing that really helped their business. So I think it's almost time for me to try and bring this short introduction to a close. And I just want to summarize about a couple of things that I talked about. So first of all, the disruption will not go away. It will continue. And many organizations are currently looking at mechanisms so that they're in a position really not just to cope, but really to thrive during these times. Many organizations also, when they start thinking about that, are looking at their own digital maturity. They've been looking at their digital maturity for some time, and now they really are bringing supply chain and manufacturing practices right into the middle and at the top of the agenda when they're thinking about the broader digitization of their business and the digital maturity they have. For us, the opportunity is bigger than ever. Because the impact of COVID has been so profound. And therefore, again, this is a fantastic and accelerated path that we're on when we look at Industry 4.0 and supply chains. And I think for many organizations, they've in some instances had digital officers, chief digital officers. They've sometimes set up organizations to look at digital maturity. And when I've talked with these individuals in the past, many of them have said, we see it, but we're not really sure what is the use case, and we're not really sure where the business case is for the sorts of investments associated with digitization. And today, that conversation is a much shorter conversation because it's in front of everybody. They see the empty shelves in the supermarkets, they see the lockdowns that are continuing to happen globally, and they really, really understand that actually the use case is simple. It's about building that resilience into their supply chains. It's about building agility into their manufacturing processes through Industry 4.0. On top of that, I will leave you with the fact that some things don't change. Many organizations still through these difficult times are trying to make sure that their customers are at the center of everything they do. It's only through moving forward with customer-centric practices that they'll continue to thrive. And I think the whole point here is that what we've considered to be manufacturing, what we've considered to be supply chains in the past, we are reinventing the way that production works. We are reinventing where the priorities are. And organizations are looking at this holistically, and they're looking at it in a networked way to connect all of their company and all of the companies that they need to be a successful business. With that, I will say thank you, and I think hand over back to Jane. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Graham. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for the rich context for our discussions to follow. You've given us a lot of food for thought. So now let me bring on our panelist and moderator for our panel discussion. We have with us Dr. Andreas Hauser, Director of Digital Service at TÜV Asia Pacific. Dr. Hauser leads the Center of Excellence Digital Service in Singapore. It's a key unit in TÜV's digitalization strategy that drives development of new solutions around safety, cybersecurity, and reliability of smart systems in strategic segments such as autonomous driving, Industry 4.0, and smart healthcare. Next, we have Andy Lynn, Head of Digital Manufacturing Business at Konica Minolta. In this role, Andy brings his diverse experiences and background from earlier career stints in implementing factory automation and ASRS systems. He leads a team of digital manufacturing consultants in driving their business in Southeast Asia. We also have with us Matt Chan, Industry 4.0 go-to-market lead for SAP Asia Pacific and Japan. Matt is a senior director supporting Asia Pacific and Japan region from his base here in Singapore. He has assumed numerous roles at SAP over the years, including leading the business and strategy development for the Leonardo IoT business Asia Pacific, and also the discrete industry segment to drive enterprise digital transformation. Next, we also have Mr. Willie Koh, founder and CEO of Racer Technology. Willie is a member of the Institution of Manufacturing Engineers, the Society of Manufacturing USA, and also the Machining Technology Association. He oversees Racer's group of companies and subsidiaries over 8 facilities in Asia and spearheads their R&D division for medical devices and prototyping. He's also on the board of the Singapore Manufacturing Federation Global Business Groups and is a council member of the Singapore Precision Engineering and Technology Association. And moderating this panel session is Kenneth Koh, Associate Partner of McKinsey & Company. Kenneth is based in Kuala Lumpur and serves both public and private sector clients across MNCs and SMEs on complex impact-driven transformation programs with a focus on Industry 4.0 implementation. I'm glad to hand things over to Kenneth now to take us through this segment.
Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you very much to everyone who is a part of this session. I think, you know, to kick us off, I'd like to start off with the addressing a little bit the elephant in the room, right? I know Graham spoke quite a fair bit about how disruptions are in this day and age becoming more and more common, right? From the trade wars to the to COVID today, and if I just, you know, dive into COVID for a second, right? I think we've all obviously heard by now about how COVID-19 has accelerated transitions to digital and Industry 4.0. You know, companies who are looking to circumvent demand unpredictability, manpower shortages, and all sorts of other disruptions. And you know, the first thing I'd like to talk about, right, and turn this over to our panelists, right, is in your experience on the ground today, as you go out and work with your customers, with your networks, right, what sort of Industry 4.0 technologies, right, are you seeing becoming increasingly relevant today, right, in light of this whole new normal, right? And could you tell us a little bit about that? Perhaps Dr. Andreas, you'd like to start?
Yes, thanks a lot, Kenneth, for the introduction. Actually, so I think Graham already touched on very important points, and I mean, clearly supply chain is currently in the focus, yeah. But let me give an additional or a bit of broader perspective before I come to the specific answer, as I think there is not really the technology right now we see mainly. It's really very diverse still. So when we think about Industry 4.0, what is this ultimately? It's ultimately kind of the materialization of an agile company, right? An agile company, we heard it already in the introduction, is really about becoming adjustable to certain incidents. The incidents currently is the impact of COVID on the supply chain mainly, right? But ultimately, it's a concept for companies to react to any type of incidents, and that's why I think it's a bit a broader topic than only the supply chain. When we think about it, companies may have issues, yes, with the supply. They may run out of materials, and then they look, of course, into the resilience, the recovery of the supply chain. Other companies may struggle differently. They may have to bring in new products, for instance, right? Because they see that through the disruption, they have to change their business model. So it's very important to look also into that dimension. That's what we also see as a product life cycle, for instance, right? How to bring in products fast into the market. We see it, for instance, in the automotive sector right now. Massive disruption that doesn't come along just restarting the same system again and again. It's about now bringing electric cars into the market very fast, right? So they have this additional perspective to the supply chain, this is product life cycle. Another aspect, that's the third dimension, actually is then within the factory, how fast can you actually ramp up your production again from downtimes, yeah, from unplanned downtimes? How fast can you address the new requirements? So we heard also that the problems are holistic. Yes, they are holistic, but ultimately we can break it down into really these three dimensions, which is the horizontal integration, supply chain, the vertical integration, how fast and how good you basically integrate all your IT systems and your also your organization, of course, in order. That's when the lights switch off here, then I have to wave shortly, sorry for that. And the third dimension is what I mentioned, really the product life cycle. This becomes more and more key. And in that regard, I can't really say this is the main focus right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Andreas. And maybe to hear a little bit from Matt, any thoughts to add?
Sure. I think back to normal or back to the new normal is the top wish for everybody, right? So today I also take the chance back to the office, sit beside the pool table, right? And nobody there. So I think everybody missed those period, how we back to normal and travel, visit all the different people and have a different cultures and enjoy the meal from different country. So recently, we also have lots of conversation with our customer and manufacturers. What do they think about back to normal? So we have like a 3 T's, right? So the first one is the business continuity. So for example, till now, lots of people still working from home and the business still need to keep running. And in the manufacturing side, the production line needs to keep running, but they still need to maintain those social distance and also separate the workers in different shifts. So what we see in this area is about automation, right? When we talk about automation, we can have a 2 angles. One is physical system automation that we believe lots of manufacturers, they invest and upgrade their machines, have a robotic arm, AGV, IoT sensors, right? To use those physical system kind of devices and bring those automation in their shop floor. But the other angle is more focused on the business process, right? So how do we do the business process integration and automation? Because manufacturing is not just entire business. So company run a business, like Graham mentioned, is designed to operate, right? So we cover from the design, planning, manufacturing, logistic, and the field services. So this is a core value chain for the manufacturers. And right now, since the COVID, and each line of business, they have their own system, they have their own process. So it's even more silo. So the other hand is how we bring those business process integrate together and do the business process automation. So that's the first T, like a business opportunity, continuity. And second is visibility. So I believe from the Industry 4.0 technology, we talk about a lot of big data, analytics, machine learning. So this is the area that lots of people talking about how we bring those data. But I remember I visited one Japan power company a few years ago. The general manager talked to us, say, he can connect all the census data. However, they didn't know how to use the data. So at the end of the conversation, I think we both agree that we need to bring the IT and OT data together, from the measurement, the data from the shop floor, and also the business data from the business process that can generate the business value. And nevertheless, like Grant also mentioned, the network, right? So there are lots of kind of a topic around how we extend our visibility from internal to external via the network, because typically we have our own data in our system. But right now, how we extend those visibilities to the external. And there are lots of examples like the consumer product industry. They would like to collect the consumer kind of a behavior or demand signal from their customer, from the supermarket, from the convenience store, and then give the insight and the impact and influence in the supply chain planning, manufacturing, or procurement. So that's the visibility. And last one is the opportunity. So during the COVID, I think lots of manufacturers talking about repurpose their production line. So from building the electronic product to masks or some centralizers or ventilators. So this is more topic around the resilient supply chain and manufacturing. I think lots of people already focus on that. But the other hand is some manufacturers already have a forward looking. They understand their customer investment behavior is going to be changed. Lots of their customer, they want to change the CapEx to the OpEx. So they don't want to invest a huge money at the beginning. So this is the new business model that lots of manufacturers think about how do they fulfill their customer requirements. And we do have one example in Germany that we have a customer, Kessel Compressors. They build the air compressor machine before they sell the product. But right now they sell the air. So they have a new business model that the customer can just consume the air, and they just send a bill like a utility company. They understand how much air they consume. So they totally change the business model. So that would be the third T, right? Opportunity. So again, this is the three T's: business continuity, and the visibility, and opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Matt. And if I just take visibility as an example, I mean, in a lot of the research that we've done here at McKinsey, right, we also see that as we are sitting in this COVID and economic downturn, in this situation where a lot of companies are under pressure, I think there is new appreciation for the importance of this visibility, which kind of links back to what Graham was talking about, right? I mean, if we're talking about a holistic digital transformation that goes beyond just the four walls of our manufacturing and into our supply chain, I think a big part of that, right, or a big foundation of that is being able to connect everything, right, and have that visibility of all of our different assets and moving parts and people, right? So really fully agree with those points, right? I'd like to shift over and get some thoughts from Andy as well as Willie, right? As obviously, you know, industry leaders and people who are actually operating shop floors and operations in terms of digital manufacturing. And my question to you is that I think we have seen we've heard a lot about Industry 4.0 in the last few years. This is no longer a new theme, right? Having said that, I think that our research at least shows that many companies have historically struggled to scale, right, Industry 4.0 efforts. Now, while everyone has sort of started, they're doing pilots, they're doing trials, they've got all sorts of little projects that are going on, right? Many of them eventually get stuck in sort of a pilot trap, right? And many a time this is due to a mismatch between the business need and the push towards technology, and also, you know, challenges with regards to cost and bringing the organization or the people along, right? In a lot of companies that we go out to and we speak to, one of the key challenges they always say is that maybe my workforce is not ready, right? This is something that is really complex. It's time consuming. If my workforce is not ready, I'm the only one who can do this and I don't have the time, right? So I wanted to get your thoughts, right? What lessons would you have to share with companies who are looking to avoid these sorts of challenges, right?
Maybe
Your
I start
thoughts.
off with, we have 8 factories. So I think that if you start off with factory 4.0, I think is quite a mismatch. I think your factory should be lean. You should have 5S. You should have a lean management. You should have all these first, all the 5S and everything. And then you have factory 4.0. For instance, for us, we are medical device. So we are high mix, low volume. So if you are running at a high volume disposable, factory 4.0 is the best because it monitor everything. Today, our products only run for a day or two, and then we have to multitask. Our system have to be flexible because the equipment we make is only maybe 1 month, 2 pieces, but they are like 20, 40 type of products. So the line must be very flexible, and the most of the operator are actually lead girls. They are multitask trained. They assemble about 1 to 2 machine a day, or sometimes one machine takes about a month to build because we do diagnostics, we do ventilator. So during the pandemics, actually most of facility are running because almost all the factory are 4.0. So except that our Malaysia factory, because of the shutdown, and they are, I think, 2 week shutdown because they need some regulation to get it up and running, and also they need to have check to make sure that you must have the require procedure before you get up and running. So that's our problem with our 3 factory in Malaysia. But the rest, we find that it's okay. In fact, some of the factory, especially in Singapore, we managed to convert it into to cater for the government, because the ESG Temasek, they came to us to ask us to help to run surgical masks, to help us to run swab kit, antibody test kit. So in fact, we convert a few of our line instead of running diagnostic equipment into test kit, because we also do have the IVD ISO certification, and then so we can kick it off fast. And because I'm also the chairman of the Singapore MedTech Consortium, we find that it's a blessing in disguise is that for the last 12 years, we have been mentoring about maybe close to 50 to 65 company, and most of them are semi 4.0, or they are in line with a lot of medical requirements. So during the pandemic, we actually able to kick off almost close to I would say 40 to 50% of the consortium to supply locally. That means a lot of the raw material was cut off from, especially from China, because China have their first. So we don't have, even we want to have Tan Tock Seng asked us to supply face masks, and Singapore never make face masks because those are cheap items, mostly made in China. So but we have to do it ourselves. So in fact, we kick off, I think, about eight SME to die cut, supply raw material, revert, and I think we supply close to 1 million of masks during the pandemic, all made in Singapore locally. So so I do appreciate the early start of the factory 4.0 is actually do have a certain thing. And also just to take note is that if you are, the problem is in Singapore is that if you are running a component is, I think, sunset industry, because the high volume are mostly done elsewhere. So here for us, we are running equipment. That means more value added, but with more value added products, their volume is very low. So if a volume is low, to have factory 4.0 is a very tough, because now you're supposed to be checking on your operator. If operator clock in, right, I don't think he will straight start away. So how you clock it, the productivity, the workmanship and everything. So all this is, if you clock on machine, it's easy. Machine, you put a sensor, everything, but it's not so deep, so easy to clock on people or their workmanship or their. So you need a smart table, a smart operating table. So I think in that area is still a very subjective and still very deep discussion you need to discuss. But again, also want to emphasize is not just Factory 4.0. You also have to make sure that your line is lean, already lean, not and well laid out. 5S, the orientation is correct. Everything is correct before you go for Factory 4.0. Yeah.
Thanks for your thoughts. Andy?
Sure. Right, on the topic of mismatch of technologies, I think there is a lot of technologies out there in the market from different providers, and there's simply no easy way to learn all of these technologies in a short time and make a call on which is the most suitable solution for any business. So of course, this is where consultants like KM or McKinsey comes in to make the proposal. So my advice would be to identify maybe 1 or 2 areas in your current operations where you are not satisfied with. Go with a small POC. I think a POC is of course a really important event or activity prior to adopting any Industry 4.0 technologies. Then test these technologies, see if it brings any value, the improvements in the area until you're satisfied with it. Eventually start off with a small pilot as well, and eventually extend to a full-scale deployment. But of course, one advice would be, if it's possible, if it's available, go with one that provides with a subscription plan. Then at least you can actually exit from this trap, if you call it, once the subscription expires. So that's my point of view.
Thank you. And if I summarized, a lot of what the both of you, Willie and Andy, that you've mentioned, I think it comes down to, as you've mentioned, Willie, we've got to start from a strong base, from a lean base. We've got to make sure that our own processes, our own operations are robust to a certain extent. And then we start thinking about how do we get further productivity, further improvement out of it with the use of Industry 4.0 technologies. And I like what you said, Andy, right? Where there is, in a lot of senses, a smaller, a risk-free approach towards trying some of these as a proof of concept, as a pilot. We've got one question from the group, which I think is very relevant, and I'd like to get thoughts from across our panel speakers on this, right? And so the question is, how should a company direct their efforts, right, and figure out which area to prioritize, given that in the marketplace today there is already a wealth of technology, solutions, and solution providers. So where, I guess, in other words, how do I decide where I start, right? So any thoughts?
Yeah, maybe I can give a comment on that. Also, besides the fact that there is a tool which is called Smart Industry Readiness Index, you may have heard of that, of course, which is exactly designed for this, how to start basically in a more strategic manner the area, also how to start basically this transformation, prioritize the areas. I think that is definitely a good starting point. Generally, and this I think is also obviously the issue, that there's so many solutions, so many concepts, initiatives, and it's very hard to understand, yeah, what is it, what should I do now? And I think the first step should be simply your business sense. Yeah, the companies themselves or itself has to define what are the business objectives, right? We hear very often, okay, what's the I4.0 technology I should implement? What is the solution that helps me somehow, right? But the first question should be, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to become more flexible? Do you want to become faster, bring in products faster into the market? You mainly focus on efficiency gains, or you have a quality issue, right? And that comes very much from the business perspectives and objectives for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years. And then you derive which technologies can help you to get there. Yeah, that we don't take the technologies kind of as an end. It's a means to achieve something. And what we see very often is that exactly that piece is missing. We have been doing business for the last, let's say, 10, 20 years in a very similar manner. Incremental improvement, we heard it, lean is of course critical also to have streamlined processes. But now with this, when we talk always about transformation, that is by definition not an incremental improvement anymore, right? One has to ask basically what I really want to achieve strategically. And I think it's really important that it's not enough anymore to put some sensors on a piece of machine. One should start with pilots, but it has to be embedded into a proper strategy, which is driven by business KPIs and not by technology discussions. I think sometimes we simply start from the wrong side. So there is not the, let's say, prioritized solution. It's coming from the individual needs of the company.
I think I fully agree. So we have people coming in, like for instance, when we start off with Factory 4.0 about I think 5 years ago, I think the data we collected is too many data. So I keep on asking, are you going to use all those data? And nobody can reply. So right now we only collect those that are required. And then the next thing is that after we implement Singapore, when our overseas in Malaysia came in, and some of our supplier inside the Magna Consortium was when they come over and they look at it, it's like, wow, there's so much of investment we have to invest on Factory 4.0. How am I going to do it? They will never follow up. So I did tell them is that it is actually very basic and very simple. You don't need to change anything on your existing business. If your business is already lean, if your line is already lean, Factory 4.0 is just to add more information. Like right now, instead of realizing that yesterday what you have run, today you are already know the second ago that how many more transparent. So it's only all those data collected that you must know how to use, and not to be so complicated as to collect everything but use nothing. So it must suit what you want. And just be more. I think today I think there is also a lot of consultant and area that they can look into this. For instance, when we go in, we try with Singapore first, and then it worked well, and then we do it in our Batam factory, Malaysia factory, and even in India. Recently, we in fact China one is more advanced because most of their parts are all brand new. So I agree with it depends what is more important to your business.
Yeah. I want to echo Willie just mentioned. Okay, so I think to understand what we need and what are the business drivers and business goal is quite important. Instead of go into the kind of data collection or the shop automation directly. So for example, we see lots of companies, they want to secure their revenue. So how fast they can time to market, time to volume is quite important. But when we talk about this topic, it's not just manufacturing. And this topic can link together from the design to the planning, procurement, and down to the manufacturing, right? So I would say this is another angle that we need to think about from the high level and down to those management business drivers, and then think about what kind of a solution can help in this area.
I fully agree this. For instance, back in, I think, February, we have 2 requests urgently from one from our US customer. It's actually the World Ventilator Foundation. They have a request for urgent emergency ventilator, and they need to develop it fast. So we have to come in to help them to develop. And we find that in the past, to do a ventilator is a class 3 device. It will take about 3 years to do because you need to have the history base, clinical trial, and everything. And now you want to do it in 3 months. It's almost not possible. But because of the technology, the 4.0, and you are able to record it in your R&D site on the history base, whatever you develop. And also, of course, because during the pandemics, there are this emergency FDA, so you don't need to go through all the steps of clinical trial. So all this, what I'm trying to say is all this Factory 4.0, all this set up in the past for 5 years do help to speed up the development of a emergency ventilator for our customer in US. And also recently we also did one for the UK government, more for, not for the emergency, but for the ICU ventilator. And those developed is pretty fast in a sense. If it take a normal procedure, it would take at least maybe 5 years or 3 years, because that's the way it is done in the past for medical devices. And now because of the pandemics and the shortage of ventilator, of course now everything is stabilized. So I think there's enough ventilator going out. But during the time in February, March, that's where the panic started. And even I think Asia is also screaming for ventilator. So that's some of experience we are we experienced before, and the Factory 4.0 do help expedite on the data collection. That is on the R&D, because we need history base. Because when it comes to later for regulatory approval, they need to know why you change this diode, why you change this capacitor, why do you change this motor. If you don't have the reason for it, you have to backtrack it, and that takes time. And then this will all delay all the procedure. So that's my. So I fully agree with that.
I hear you. And I think yep, go ahead, Andy.
Sorry. Yep, I think we all have a common view of on this topic. So basically, I think the important thing is to identify the objectives, where the areas where you want to focus on before deploying any Industry 4.0 solutions. So I think it's not wise to actually look at all the pillars of Industry 4.0 and lose focus on it. I think we have to look into our business processes, where are the areas that we are lacking in, unsatisfied with that some particular process, operations flow, before we, that's where the areas that we should focus on. Yep.
I fully echo that, right, Andy, and thanks for that summary. I do, you know, in the work that we do, and we go around with, we go out talking to SMEs as well as MNCs alike. And I guess the most common misconception, right, or the most common myth that we hear about Industry 4.0 is that it's all about the technologies. And it's really, when we get into those kinds of conversations, right, and try to shift mindsets, right, amongst management teams, amongst business leaders, that really technology in this case is just a tool, right? As many of our panelists have said, I think it starts from our business, right? What exactly is going to make the most sense? What's going to drive the most value? Is it an increase in throughput? Is it an improvement in quality? Is it, you know, lower logistics costs? And starting from that, followed by then what is the most pragmatic form of technology that I can use to give me the kind of visibility, to give me the kind of data or insights to help me manage these processes better? That's a much better starting point, right? And so there is a third element there, I think, right? If we start with the business, we talk about what exactly we need, we use technology in a pragmatic manner, right? I think there is a third and very important bucket around the people, right? Or the organization. And this goes right from the operators on the ground all the way up to our managers and management team, right? And so perhaps, Andy, if you could share a few thoughts, right, about in your experience, right, with how do we need to best manage people, right, and engage them, engage our own organizations in this whole effort in Industry 4.0 in order to sustain?
I guess a lot of things involves change management. We have, for example, I think in any traditional business, there's a set of people that is do not want to change. They are still stuck in a certain mindset. But I think that the key thing about getting these people to embrace Industry 4.0 is to actually share with them or educate them what are the benefits of implementing a certain solutions, how that will actually help them, and eventually how that will actually if not only bring the business process in a more efficient manner, but as well as from their own career perspective, how it will actually develop them. So I believe this aspect of education, change management within an organization even involves a knowledge sharing on how these technologies can are able to bring the organization forward into the next phase. So that's what I think.
Can I give an example how we able to save 30% when we launched a 4.0? So it used to be we have to run 3 shifts. So we are running 3 shifts. And then when we do the 4.0 at one time, we realize is that my 3rd shift is every time either shortage of material, shortage of manpower because they didn't come to work. And all this we didn't know until the next day, because then you would know. But with the 4.0, we realize is that when we run the data for that particular month, we find that hey, you have this, like the 3rd shift is there's a lot of other problems coming up. And 2nd shift also, sometimes raw material finish everything. And then what we do is that instead of running 3 shifts, why don't you just consolidate everything and run on 2 shifts? And you work, and we save 30%. And if our customer were asking us, what's the capacity? Oh, we still have 30% capacity because the 3rd shift we are not running. So that's one way I find that it's a good example of how we're able to save 30% is because of the 3 shift. And also the manpower. In the past, there's a lot of gray area you can't see, but then with the with all these checking and sensor or monitoring RFID of the worker working around everything, we're able to do this, because most of our raw material today, everything is all tagged with RFID. So you don't need to count it. In the past, when we ship something back to our Batam factory, they have to pull out now the whole container, and they say that 1 box is missing, 2 boxes is missing, and they have to recount everything in the container. Today you don't need. You just get a scanner and you scan it, and everything is in the container. As long as there's no metal within the meter, you can scan it. You don't need to bring out all the box or bring out all the pallet and recount it. So that's one thing I just want to highlight, how it really can real time improve the productivity and everything.
I would just like to add one more thought, just a quick one, actually. Yes, I fully agree, right? You have to bring the people on board and so on. And I think very valid the comments here. But I think one thing is also important to maintain, to make clear, there's a need. You have to change. You have to transform, right? There is no choice. I think this is also must be very clearly stated. If you continue the path you are going in the classical way, you may have problems in the future, a lot of problems, right? There is a necessity to transform. It's not an option. And I think this sense of urgency must be also come across. It's a painful process to change, but if you don't change, it will be a very painful journey, a much more painful journey than the change itself is. And we see this in every company. You always want to stick to the classical business. But if you know that your classical business model may be disrupted in the next 3 to 5 years, you are then willing to change. You have a different approach and mindset to really change. So I think it's really must be also made clear that it's a must and not an option.
And I think you need to come from the top management.
Yes.
The whole management must support it.
Absolutely.
If only the manager support it, the boss have to support it.
Yes, if the boss is not on board, you can forget the whole thing, and all the smaller bosses also need to be on board. Otherwise, also doesn't work. Nothing works.
All right.
Just a quick.
There's no complacent.
Addition point regard to the people. So not only focus on the training, but also how do we focus on the people's healthy and the safety, right? So I think we also have some example in Japan that the driver put the IoT sensors to detect all the healthy status for those drivers. And the same scenario in the shop floor, the workers how to use those sensors to detect the people's status, and if it is a health or not, then we can avoid lots of risk happen. So that's another angle that we can think about.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, you know, as we have a few minutes left in this, I think we've received quite a number of questions, right? And maybe if I attempt to summarize them into a single response that we can all work on, is, you know, as we look at the disruptions that we're facing today, you know, businesses face challenges already with time and availability of resources. Is this the right time to add another project, right? That was one question we got. And we've got quite a number of different questions as well about, you know, how can we think about Industry 4.0 focusing on value creation instead of just cost reduction and efficiency, right? I guess if I frame both of these together for our panelists, right, to respond to, right, I guess tell us, give us your thoughts, right, about, do you believe that there is a right time for Industry 4.0 transformation? Is it now, with the backdrop of all of these other fires that most companies are fighting on a day-to-day basis, right? And what would be your 1 to 2 thoughts around how they can direct these efforts, right? So that it doesn't, so that in a way that it doesn't necessarily need to be just about responding to an immediate need, but also something that is longer term in nature, right? Over to you.
I can maybe just give a quick answer to that. I think it also ties to the pilot issue, right? That we stick to pilots. If you consider I4.0 as an add-on topic, this is already a very, I think, wrong misperception, because you look at that just as another project. I4.0 means, and again, in the true sense of transformation, it's not just adding a pilot and add a specific technology. It's about really fundamentally changing the way you're manufacturing. I think if this is not clear, and if this is not the commitment you give, it will be always an additional issue. And of course, currently we face that situation that people, I mean, first of all, you make sure that you are not drowning, clearly, right? Save your cash, save somehow your situation, that's clear. But what we have heard from Graham on also, I think that I can confirm that as well. This is kind of over, right? People see that we are not all collapsing, right? That was at the beginning the question, right? So now we see we can survive, and now it's about how move I now into the next stage. And if one considers I4.0 as an additional burden, kind of, it's actually the solution, right? And it's more the question how you bring that in now. And there I agree what Andy mentioned, that don't start with the 150%, I want to be completely different tomorrow. That also will not work, right? But on the other hand, also be very clear, if you start that transformation, be consistent, be persistent and strategic, and then you put things into place. And you can start putting things into place with a very little budget. You don't have to do the big thing, but the worst, I think what we see very often, I can also include our Pursuit company, you just have a responsible person who is dealing with digital projects. They are running some pilots, but it's not clearly, it's not fully absorbed and taken over by the operational unit. And this we see very often. It's all parallel. The real guys who have the responsibility, they still push this digital stuff aside. So we have some digital, let's say, champions, but they don't have the P&L responsibility to really make a difference. And that is for us always the indicator of whether this company is serious about it. And then you make it happen, and you see this as a solution and not as a problem. I think this is one key, is really that it must be, let's say, embedded in a proper strategy and vision, and not just having a few pilots in parallel running. That will not work.
Thanks, Doctor. Matt, Andy?
Yep. So I would say when we look at the digital transformation, this is not new. Many kind of company already have this kind of thought and journey for the digital transformation a couple of years ago. But I would say due to COVID, that is a fasten this kind of process and fasten this transformation journey. by COVID. And that's reason from SAP side, we also have one kind of a slogan, industry 4.0 means it's now to help leverage industry 4.0 to help the company to do the digital transformation. And second point is we are not just narrowed down into the manufacturing. We, like Graham mentioned, holistic view. Now we need to think about which area that we can prioritize and what's the business driver and goal that we can solve our business quickly, so that we want to have a holistic view and not just a focus on a manufacturing area. Thank you.
Maybe let me finish up. I think at this moment the customers are all looking at their suppliers, how resilient they are. So they are not just looking at cost, how cheap you can actually provide them with the service. They want to know how resilient you are to if you are ready for the next pandemic, the next crisis. So a lot of times they will want to know what kind of technologies you have in place in your business, in your operations, so that they are more comfortable in terms of giving you the business. So I think this is more or less giving the value add or the value chain that Industry 4.0 can provide to any business. Convince your customer that you have the platform, the infrastructure in place, so that you can actually survive the next pandemic or the next crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we're just about at time.
Sorry, Kenneth, we're coming up to time, so maybe the next 2 minutes, everyone have a quick wrap up on your final thoughts for this section.
Sure. I think if I can just kick things off and close it on this end, right? I think we've had a good discussion today, and while there are quite a few more questions that we weren't able to answer, I will stay on and continue to type out the answers after this session. But I do think that there is an urgent and a clear and present need, right, for us to be thinking about Industry 4.0. If today we are starting our thoughts about, hey, how do I get started? When do I get started? I think in this case, we are already behind the curve, right? There is a quote that I'd like to share from the chairman, actually, of one of the MNCs that we serve, right? And he's based out of Japan, and he said at a town hall to all of the employees that, look, we are either going to digitize or we are going to die, right? Now that is obviously quite provocative, right? But I think that in a lot of the work that we do, when we see Industry 4.0 being implemented and being thought about across many companies, both big and small, right? I think the most important thing is get started, right? I think the whole idea about this being a project with a definitive end date, that's not going to work, right? But rather, if it is more of a journey, as Andreas calls it, a complete transformation, right? And that's the kind of mindset that we need to bring to the table, right? That this is not about incremental. This is how do we change the way that we work? How do we change the way that we operate? And all the benefits that come along with it, right? Whether it's value creation, cost reduction, so on and so forth, right? And unless we get ourselves into that kind of mindset, this will always be just another piece of paper in the whole pile of things that we have to do or to get to in the next few weeks, months, years, whatsoever, right? And so there is a clear and urgent need. That's it from me.
Okay, so great. Thank you so much. And on that note, very urgent note, thank you all our speakers, and thanks Kenneth for taking us through this discussion. Okay,
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So for the audience, before we move on to the next segment, please take a moment to let us know what you think of the discussion earlier by completing our feedback poll. And do stay with us because we'll be transitioning to the breakout, okay? So in breakout room 1, we will have David Coldry and David Harrison, who will take on the topic, redefining asset management with Industry 4.0. While in breakout room 2, we will have Anchal Sood moderating the discussion with Matt Chan, Senthil Kumar and Carlos Guerra on the topic of reinventing production with Industry 4.0. For our audiences who joined us via live stream on Facebook, the recording of this discussion just now and the breakout sessions will be made available after today. This is breakout room 1, where we have David Coldry from SAP and David Harrison from Rising to take us through a discussion on asset management in the context of Industry 4.0. David Coldry is the industry lead for digital transformation in energy and natural resources at SAP Southeast Asia. He brings over 30 years global experience in diverse advisory and consulting roles in ICT, including over 19 years with SAP in Asia Pacific. With us also is David Harrison, who's Director of Business Development Asia at Rising. He's an engineer and manager with over 25 years experience in operation, maintenance, and asset management of high capital value assets. So to our audience, please feel free to ask questions in the chat forum. And if you face any technical issues, please private message our SINGAX help team, okay? So at this point, I'd like to invite to both Davids. Actually, there's a little bit of a private joke here because to distinguish between the both of you verbally, I'm going to call you David C and David H. Yeah, I hope that works. All right. So that you won't both say yes when I ask a question that David.
Thank you.
All right. So to kick things off, could David, whichever one, share the context of this collaboration between SAP and Rising to give us some background on your conversation?
Okay, so it's David C here. So one of the things that Rising did was it worked on a fabulous project in North America, where what they did was they worked with a customer at a fairly remote site to help them with their digitization process, but also the maintenance process, which was to help reduce downtime, because it's a remote site and so a mine, and so downtime is obviously lost productivity. But the other thing in mining is it's also danger. So you also have to be very careful that everything needs to run well and run productively. Otherwise, you have problems with physical safety. So that's another thing that we need to keep in mind with many of the extractive industries. So David, do you want to add to that?
I just think that it's important to remember that it is about automation and it's about Industry 4.0. But as the discussion went earlier, it's about solving a problem and it's about working with the people. And that was a big issue with the Freeport Mcmurran project, and we'll go into a bit more about that later.
Right. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that Graham was talking about earlier was this digital supply chain, this whole design to operate concept that we talk about at SAP. And this helps you with the resiliency that you need to be able to change rapidly, as the previous speakers were talking about. So COVID is one of the challenges that companies have today, and there have been challenges in the past, and there will definitely be challenges in the future. And so it's how to bring this resiliency so that enables you to focus on your customer. As the previous speakers talked about, is how to bring productivity improvement. But the other topic that's becoming more and more important is the sustainability piece. And sustainability is really two pieces in my mind. It's what are your customers asking for, and what is your supply chain needing to measure, because you're going to need to be able to prove what you are doing. And the other important part is the money supply. So financiers are getting more and more interested in your specific company's sustainability because they are lending you money, and their stakeholders are asking and making sure that they are lending money wisely. I'll give an example. In international shipping, there's something called the Poseidon Principles that's quite new. And this is a group of banks, mainly European banks at this stage, but they are growing. And what they're doing is having a set of guidelines when lending to ship owners, because these are long-term lending. And so the the ship owners, they want to make sure are meeting the IMO, the International Maritime Organization's guidelines, and willing to report back on how polluting these ships are. So I suspect this is becoming more and more important. So the money supply has also become really important. And so if you can't get tier 1 money, it means you have to go to tier 2 money, and tier 2 money will be more expensive. Okay, so that's another reason why this has become sustainability has become much more important. So if we see in this, this topics on the right-hand side, so the design to operate covers the design piece. So what we're looking at there is to be able to reduce the time to market, to have processes in place, just like other processes, and design is a process. For planning to bring together both what you're proposing to sell with what you're proposing to produce, to bring these together to operate in a much more holistic company-wise, okay? So the manufacturing, so we've spoken a bit about that already, but in the delivery piece, how do you do that efficiently with speed when the customer wants it? And from a sustainable perspective, that's becoming more and more important. So as customers start to choose where they want a product from, they will start to look at what is the delivery sustainability, not only the delivery cost. Then from the operate perspective, so this is where we have the maintenance piece, the managing of the assets, but there's also operating where you are selling a product to a customer, but you are maintaining that asset. So no longer is it just a CapEx model where you sell a product, but actually you're selling a service. And so you need to be able to operate that asset that's no longer sitting in your premises, but it's sitting in one of your customers' premises. And I'll come to that with some examples. And then lastly, about the network. So the network is not only inside your company, but it's also connecting to your customers, connecting to your suppliers, and connecting to your ecosystem, because supply chains are very fragmented today. And so you need to be able to connect in a very autonomous way, in a high efficiency way with this much larger network. Okay, if you go to the next slide. So if you look in the middle piece there, the piece that says the SAP, the Intelligent Enterprise. So that covers the business processes, the enterprise level, from the front office to the supply chain to the back office. And what SAP has done really well is to bring these together. So think of single pieces of data that flow between these. So we have that integration and we have that efficiency within that horizontal integration. What we now need to do is to apply those same principles to the vertical integration, to be able to include, as the previous speakers were talking about, include that data that is there already. How do you use the data that you have for more than one purpose? Because it does have more than one purpose. So I'll give you a little example. Mohawk Industries is a flooring manufacturer. So they manufacture carpets and floors, that kind of thing. So they have a production process and they have sensors on their machines, and they know when there's a flaw in the carpet. And so they record that. It's in the QA, the quality assurance system, and they know what's there. But they also know when it is sold, and so they can know what sales order it's attached to. So Mohawk used to have a claims department that would get claims from customers that would say, I bought this large piece of carpet, but it's got a flaw in it. When you're flooring, putting a carpet down in your lounge or dining room or your bedroom, generally the person laying it can hide those flaws or cut the carpet so you can't see it. However, if you're laying a carpet on a large building entrance or an airport, it's very hard to hide those flaws. And so you might have to cut a piece of the carpet up and throw it away. And that's obviously a cost to you. And so you submit a claim. And what would happen at Mohawk is they would have these claims, and they had certain KPIs when they needed to reply by. And when they were getting slow and they couldn't process them quick enough, they would just release all the claims. And then Mohawk said, well, this is not very smart. Why don't we have the data? The sensors on the machine pick it up. We know when there's a fault. We know who we've sold it to. So when we get a claim from that sales order, why don't we just approve it automatically? Because we know there's a fault. There is no need for anybody to be involved. And that's one of the ways how you integrate this business data, this technical data, into a business process. And I think that's, for me, really the key. In the previous session, people were talking about proof of concepts or POCs. And for me, it's what is the business reason? Why would you do it? How are you going to take this data that's on the bottom part of the screen that you have and integrate it into a business process? Because then it becomes valuable. Yes, you need to do a POC to test the process is working, you have the data and you clean the data, etc. But you know what you're going to do because there's a business reason for doing it. So I'll also show you another example in the later slide of another company that's doing the same thing, is connecting the data they are collecting with satisfying their customers' requirements. Okay, so if you go to the next page. So as Graham also talked about, so we have this concept of being able to center on the customer. When you can create an awareness of what you have, it's much easier to satisfy your customers' needs. When you can then reinvent production by knowing what your customers need and when they need it, you can then, through times of disruption like this, be more reactive, be able to do some. And then, as Graham says, you connect the whole company to use these data sources for more than one purpose. And if you go to the next slide, then I'll go through this example. So Pregus is an American company. It's a protective packaging machine company. So it makes the machines that produce those protective little airbags inside your box of whatever goodies you've ordered from whoever to protect them and to prevent damage. So they sell lots of machines, and they have technicians that go around and service them. And so these machines collect data. So what they started to do is to send the data back, because what they then were able to do is to know when the technician should go and service it, not just, oh, I need to go every 2 weeks or I need to go every month. It's like, this company is having an uptake of production and they are using this machine far more than they were. So therefore I need to go every 3 weeks because I also need to take suppliers to make sure it's operating with all the equipment. Likewise, if they were had reduced usage, that meant, well, I could only go every 6 weeks. But it also meant for their customer can now have a pay-as-you-go service. Okay, so they can move into an OPEX model as opposed to a CAPEX model. And so from Pregus's perspective, they were able to have a much, reduce the risk to their customers much more because it's a product as a service model. So without more, I'll pass over to David. What David's going to do is look as to how we improve this asset maintenance process at a large site and to reduce downtime. So over to you, David.
Thanks, David. Can I have the first slide, please? Next one. Yep. So picture, if you will, or imagine, if you like, an organisation that literally breaks, lifts, moves, and processes 835,000 tonnes of material in a day. And that's the Freeport Mcmurran mine in Morenci in Arizona, one of their mines. Not all of their mines, just one of their mines. So today we're just going to talk about, very quickly, I'll introduce you to a program they've gone through with SAP Asset Manager to improve their asset management. So next slide, please. A couple of messages from our sponsors. So I represent Rising EAM. We're a partner of SAP and we focus on enterprise asset management. We have 850 employees worldwide and you can see some of the types of organizations that we help, very much focused on enterprise asset management, getting value out of the SAP instance that you have, and helping you add value to your business. Next slide, please. So Freeport Mcmurran, the largest copper miner in the world, and of course they have 3 sites, 3 main manufacturing sites in North America, Morenci in Arizona, another site in South America, and a site in Indonesia. And they are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, world's premier supplier of copper. And we use copper in just about everything. The phones, the computers we're talking on, the supply of electricity to our houses, and in medical applications as well. So copper is a commodity product. So it's all about making it as cheaply and efficiently and as minimum impact on the environment as possible. So it's about dollars per tonne. Next slide, please. So Freeport Mcmurran have embarked on a program to digitise their workforce and digitise the way they work. And 3 parts to that is digital capture, getting better information into the organisation so they can make better decisions, the digital maintenance, and that's what we'll focus a little bit more on in a minute, and of course the digital self-service. So with the technology that's available now, we do it every day. We order stuff from Amazon, it gets delivered. You know, it's self-service. We don't have to get in the car, or if you're in Singapore, walk, or an SMRT to the nearest shopping centre and collect your goods. You can now have them, do self-service and have them delivered to you. And of course, that's a significant growth area, I guess, in COVID-19. But we'll talk about the digital maintenance. Next slide, please. So their project embarked using Agile. They did a number of sprints to design the first minimum operating model, and then they rolled that out. And since that rollout, they've continued to roll it out with upgrades, and they've expanded it to different groups. So they actually started with 1 team at Morenci, got it out and running, got them up and working, and then they've been adding improvements based on the feedback from the users, and also the improvements on the roadmap that they had for the devices. Next slide, please. So, we're talking about Asset Manager, which is a mobile device, and its standard operating features, it's about creating, executing, reviewing and approving work orders. That's what it's about, and making the maintenance workforce mobile. Don't tie them down to the desk. Because ultimately, these guys are experts at maintaining the plant. So why would you make them experts at using a keyboard? It's just not the right thing to do. So what we want them to be able to do is go out in the field with a mobile device, do their work. So that means create work orders, change work orders, order parts, get their permits to do the work safely, take photos, do forms, fill in forms, do checklists, find the drawings if they need to, if it's technical and they need to. And then what we want back is good quality data from them, so that we can actually analyze that, know which piece of plant they were working on, find our bad actors in the process, find the pieces of equipment that are failing, so then we can do an asset management strategy and eliminate those or eliminate those breakdowns. Next slide, please. So what they did at Freeport Mcmurran was in the center there, you've got the Asset Manager tool, and it's connected to their ERP, of course, on the right. And they've got a Forms app as well on the left. So the grey boxes are pretty much as it sits. That's the way they use it, straight out of the box, if you like, vanilla. There's a number of things that they have enhanced, but because it's a mobile device, you're not actually enhancing SAP. You're not in the back end with ABAP programmers and all that sort of stuff. You're actually enhancing an app. that can then be issued out to the sites. So it fits in with making it quicker, more agile, quicker to the users. We can test it. If it works, we can send it out to everybody. All that sort of functionality becomes available, where we never had that before, when we're focused on everybody had to sit at the desk and do their thing. There's also some new projects they're working on now, and we were just talking about supply chain earlier, and you'll notice the bottom box, they're actually punching out from the asset manager suite to external suppliers to be able to get their parts from a third-party vendor. So that's a new development they're working on now. And a couple of these I'll show you some examples of. Next slide, please. So of course, you know, the first part of all this is we want the supervisor who would typically look after 15 or 20 people scattered around this site, which measures 2.5 kilometres by 2 kilometres, checking up on jobs, checking up on their workforce. Are they doing safely? Do they need help? Have they got an issue? And needs to be able to approve and process work orders while they're out and about in the plant. Because if you don't give them this functionality and you lock them to the desk, then they never get out to see the jobs, and they never add value as a supervisor or a manager or an engineer to the job. All they're doing is processing work orders. So the first functionality that we gave them was the approved status. So they can actually see where the work orders are up to in the process, and they can approve them to go to the next step in the Freeport process. Next slide, please. One of the things that they did do at site or on this project was to be able to attach documents to the work orders. Now, maintenance is a funny game, right? If you're in maintenance, you understand what I'm talking about, but you never know what document you're going to need. You get called out 2 o'clock in the morning to go and fix an excavator that's right behind David C's head at the moment. You know, it's out on the pad. It's broken down. You don't know, 5 minutes before the job, you don't know what you're going to need. You don't know what drawing you're going to need. You don't know what procedures you're going to need. So we had to provide a process that allowed the technical people that were going out to the site to be able to get there and then go, this is such and such a job. I need such and such a checklist. I need a permit. I need the procedure for setting up the hydraulic ramp. So that is all available through the asset manager, and they can grab drawings, they can grab documents and pull them into the work order from the functional locations. So that gave them the freedom to be able to go out and about instead of being stuck at the desk or in the drawing office hunting up an old drawing. Next slide, please. They also integrated the asset manager with a form solution, and this gave us a couple of features, and we'll show a couple more in a minute. That if they go out to a site, let's say it's an electrician gets called to a site, electric motor's failed, I have to change the motor. I now have to have the checklist before I can re-energize the motor. They can go and get the form and attach it to the work order, then complete the form. Or if the planner has already attached the form to the work order, then in the field they can pull up the form, they can complete the form, and then all that data goes back into the work order. Next slide, please. And they can add a new form. So if they get out the site and there's a form missing or the job extends a little bit, then they can actually, from the mobile app, grab a form, add it to the work order, and proceed to do their work in a professional and professional and technical manner. Next one, please. Next slide, please. The other thing that they did at Morenci, which is a really interesting adaptation of existing technology, was to come up with what they've called the Supervisor Persona. So each supervisor now has a view when they start up the system or they open up the app. They only see the work area that's relevant to them, the work teams that are relevant to them, not all the stuff, because it's a big site. There's lots of work orders coming in and out every day. So you don't want to have to go in and run an IW38 report, for those people who know what SAP is, to find the work orders and then drill down through the work centers and cost centers and all that sort of stuff to find the job. As soon as this supervisor logs in, opens up their machine, they will only get stuff from their area. However, if they do want to go into another area, they can, but it defaults to them and their personal view. So next slide, please. So why did we do this, or what's the advantages? Of course, communication. Communication. By giving them the ability to take the device out in the field and see what's going on and actually process their work orders in the field, they're able to attach photos. They can actually have a look at the forms. They can process, you know, if you're doing a planned maintenance activity, or sorry, preventative maintenance activity, and you're taking a measurement, you can see the 5 previous to see if the trend is coming up. What does that mean to me? Do I need to do something today, or is this just a work order for another day? And of course, one of the other advantages, which starts off as a disadvantage when you're doing your change management, but eventually becomes an advantage, is about getting common processes. If we can get everybody working the same way, then everybody understands what everybody else is doing. Once we get commonality, we get common data. Once we get common data, we can make good decisions. The process also improved access to critical information in the field. So again, forms, information from SharePoint on the equipment, and the work order status. Also, other information about the criticality of the piece of equipment I'm working on. Do I need to go right now, or can I wait until I finish my cup of coffee? Enhanced accountability and tracking. We got standardized processes and visibility now. By getting everybody on a common process, we can have visibility. We can see which team is working hard and which team is a bit lighter. So we know if we need to move resources around, we can see where to go. Digital data, of course. Equipment availability is improved because we've now got higher PM compliance. In the past, we weren't really sure if the people in the field were actually doing the PMs. We thought they were. They told us they were. We trusted that they were, but now we've actually got evidence because they're now doing a checklist. They're now taking measurements. They're now sending the supervisor a photo of what they did. So we've got better visibility of what's going on. We can see the trends, and we've got far better coordination of activity because now the supervisor and the teams have up-to-date data on every job. So if a critical job comes in, they need to put together a team to go and fix that excavator behind David again. They know which jobs have already finished out in other areas, so they can pull a crew off those. And of course, in our modern world, COVID-19. So what has this done for COVID-19? Well, by having a digital platform instead of a paper process, we're now not passing pieces of paper between people. So now we've reduced the contamination or the COVID risk. One of the things that the business commented on was that they never believed that planners could actually be done, or planning could be done remotely. And now it's all done remotely as a result of COVID. So everybody's learned. One of the other things that they did was they worked out a way of putting a technical help on the tablet. And the reason they need to do that is some of the more mature members of the workforce didn't really know how to do stuff, or even if they came across an issue, then the help that we get, that you and I get on our IT at home, they can get on their tablet while they're out in the field. The other thing that the team had to work out was a way of getting the tablets out, because they've been doing this through COVID. The first main go live was in May, of how to deploy tablets, how to get the tablets in people's hands and then get them up and running without anybody actually going near them. We weren't going to bring them into a training room. We weren't going to, get them all together without masks on and contaminate the joint. So therefore, they worked out a way of dispatching the tablets, and the number of employees, the tablets are actually dispatched to their homes, and then they had the ability to self-deploy it. So they started up just like you do when you take your new phone out of the box at home, but all the systems and everything were there, and there was of course a help method to deal with that. So yeah, here we are, massive mine site, processing 835,000 tons of rock and ore in a day, and we've used the Internet of Things, Industry 4.0 to actually help us continue processing through the crisis, minimise our exposure risk to COVID-19, but also improve our efficiency overall. Next slide, please. So are there any questions? I'll just, while people think about questions, I'll jump to the next slide. If anybody wants more information, this is a condensed version of the presentation. If you go to the Rising website, there's actually a webinar that's been recorded there. You can free download at any time to watch that one. There's also a website, a video on Mobile Asset Manager on the SAP website, the link's there as well, and also on the Freeport Mcmurran project as well. So there's 3 sources of information there. If you've got time and you want to know a bit more, by all means go and have a look at those. They're very, very informative. That's it for me, David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions?
David C and David H. I think this one, was quite pertinent to what was being discussed just now by David H. It relates to 5G, I believe. Yeah, because like it also popped into my head because even now, before there's a full rollout of 5G, we are already imagining use cases, right? So I'm just thinking, when it comes on full force, how would that even further embellish these kinds of possibilities of interactions off-site and enabling visibility on performance and, you know, like you were saying, right, and the mines itself, you know, down to actually how people are dealing with different processes. Do you see that happening? Or maybe, I don't know, in the mining field, is 5G slated to come on in the next couple of years?
Okay, so there's two parts to that. You know,
Right.
the first part is you know, the technology is growing so quickly. You know, the capabilities that 5G will bring to us, we just can't foresee. You know, imagine back when you had a flip phone with 12 keys. You know, you couldn't imagine what 2G, 3G would have given you. And we're sitting here with 4G, talking about 5G. I just don't think we can foresee all of the things that's going on. That said, I'm confident that it's going to be a game changer with the amount of information we'll be able to get back. Now that's the challenge, is converting that information into something that we can actually use to make good business decisions. That's the first side to it. The second side to it is that 5G by definition needs a lot more towers. So in a remote mine site, it's going to be harder to get the quality of the Wi-Fi up to a 5G level to cover the fleet. So people like, you know, David C and myself and SAP and everybody else that's on this webinar are going to have to be very smart about how we deploy 5G into remote and difficult places to get the value out of it. So asset management, here we come.
So actually, I think of it slightly differently.
Yep.
I think of it as should we wait for the next big thing? And I don't think we should. I think, as Willie said, you have to do stuff. I think one of the things that I liked on your slide is you had an agile approach.
Yep.
So you don't try to, I think the saying is boil the ocean. You don't try to do everything in the first go. You actually do and you learn. And so for me, it's very iterative. You keep looking and you keep doing stuff until you run out of value and then you stop.
Yep.
In the old days, we did nice waterfall projects. We said we were going to do this for 6 months or 2 years, and then we'll come back. But the business has changed. So that's why I think, especially Industry 4.0, to me, it's very, agile is the way to go, because it's continuous learning. Yeah. And you're learning, and you're not waiting for new technology, because you have to do stuff to learn, to say, oh, we don't need new technology, or we have enough data, or if we had this extra data, we could do this with it. Yeah. And I think that's, the previous speakers all spoke about it. For me, it's what is the business value? It's not an IT project. It's not a technology stuff. It's how can I add value to decision-making, to business processes? And that's why I like Agile there, because Agile helps you to learn in small steps. Yep. And you learn, and then, because I think very often what I've found is, once you get to the end of a step, people then understand a question better. Whereas at the beginning, it's very difficult to see the very big picture. So you want to take it in steps, because then you learn. But it also lets you stop at some stage to say, we have a higher priority elsewhere. This is good enough for us.
Yep. What I've found with Agile is that when you're doing change management, and you know, people is a big part of what we do. You know, whether we like it or not, we've still got to get the people to use the systems. You know, whether it's remotely or not. And change management's a big part. And Agile works really well for getting their confidence to make the changes, and then to support the changes. Because if you know, the old waterfall approach where, you know, a bunch of people disappeared off into a portable huts for you know, 12 or 18 months and then came out with a whole new process, it didn't really engage with the workforce. Whereas Agile, you can get, as long as you do it well and you engage with your stakeholders well, then you can actually get this continuous improvement cycle going and engage with the people, and then the whole project goes a lot better as a result. Yeah, I like it.
Thank you. That was great.
So one of the other questions.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jane. So one of the other questions was, what about old workers? Well, my question, the way I always answer that with my customers is to say, do these people have smartphones? Oh yes, they have smartphones. They can make changes. Yeah. What we have to do is we have to give them confidence, and we all learn at different speeds. And so I think years ago I came across a call center that needed to make changes, and so they said, not this is your training and you will be competent at the end of the training. They said, this is the training, and you will carry on doing it until you get it. And so what it meant is that some of the people who needed to really struggle to learn it, they knew they could go back 2 or 3 times and do it until they were competent. So it gave them that reassurance. And for the other people who could learn it the first time, they were through. And so it just was a competence-based approach, as opposed to you need to learn this and then you're going to know it, which just doesn't work to me. And I think that's the way I approach the age group, and we all learn at different speeds. So to me, it's not so much an age thing. It's just how do we do the change management, as David says.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take offence at calling it an age issue. I think it's just technically challenged, not an age thing, because there's all sorts of people that are challenged by the technology for different reasons. And I think the biggest thing with change management in any of these projects is to provide an environment that is supportive, and be respectful that, you know, as you said, David C., you know, everybody learns at a different pace. You know, some people might pick up one thing really quickly, but a lot of the time it's about helping them understand the business and their role in the business and what they need to do to make the business successful. Oh, and by the way, we're just using this smartphone or this tablet or whatever now, and here's a supportive environment to help you learn how to do it. Then we get through most barriers.
And sometimes I think it's maybe not the question of the learner, but it's also sometimes how the teaching is conveyed, right? That we don't often look enough on that. We kind of vilify the recipient of the information. And to your earlier, the point about 5G, I totally agree, because just because the technology is available doesn't mean we have to use it. Like a Lamborghini can go for 200 miles an hour, doesn't mean you have to go at that speed to just go to the store down the street, right? So it's a matter of value and usefulness to that's relevant to your context. Yeah.
Yep. Again, it's about what problem we're solving.
Yes.
Okay.
And what do we have? What tools do we have today? Because that's what we have today. We can't say to the problem, go away and come back in a year's time. We can solve you better.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Because if we wait,
you have a customer, they have a burning need.
Yeah. And if we wait, one of our competitors will start using the technology today, and they'll be a leap ahead of us next year. We've lost the plot.
Yep.
That's true. Okay, so well, I'm afraid on that note, we're coming very close to time. So to the audiences, you may still have some questions you were too shy to ask, but don't worry, you can still do so in writing. Do join us at the Interchange community platform, where you can post comments and interact with your fellow participants in the forums there. Okay, information on joining the Interchange is shown in the chat room, but you can see on your right, I think. Okay, so do please give us some feedback on the session as well, and let us know what ideas you may have for future topics. We would love to hear from you. Okay, so you see something pop up in front of you now. Okay, so thank you so much for the two Daylets joining us today. This was a very useful, insightful trip down the mine, if I might put it that way. Okay, and that was very useful discussion. So like I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions for the two speakers today, please feel free to go ahead and type them, and we will convey them, okay, and they will get back to you, right? And the recording of today's entire webinar will also be posted on ITAP Connect website. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the Interchange and having you join us in future episodes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello everyone, I am Bert, the presenter for this breakout room 2 to tackle the topic Reinventing Production with Industry 4.0. Joining us here are Matt Chan, with a spanning career of 20 years, has been with SAP for 10 years, and currently responsible for SAP Industry 4.0 as a senior director supporting Asia Pacific and Japan region based in Singapore. Next, Senthil Kumar, a founder and CEO of Ritz Consulting and Technologies. He has over 19 years experience in management, leadership, and consulting position in information technology, plant automation, and management for Fortune 500 companies. Lastly, Carlos Guerra, an SAP ME manager for Varian Medical System with a bachelor's degree on industrial engineering and MBA, and started his career 17 years ago as SAP Arizo user. Moderating this session is Anchil Sood, SAP Digital Supply Chain Global Center of Excellence with 16 years of consulting experience in implementing SCM enterprise applications for different industries in India, Southeast Asia, US, and Europe. For our audience, please feel free to ask questions in chat forum. And if you face any technical issue, please private message our SingX help team. So to kick things off, Anshal, can you give us some context to our discussion here, please?
Thanks, Beth. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this breakout session. So today you heard Graham Conlon talk about the imperatives of Industry 4.0, how businesses are looking beyond recovery and into opportunities. The panel discussion that followed had great insights from business leaders on how adoption of Industry 4.0 is looking like. Here in this session, we plan to deep dive and double click on the manufacturing area. So Matt, let's start the discussion with your views on Industry 4.0. What are the business drivers and how do you see the transition path?
Sure, Anshul. Let me share my screen and go through the slide. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Yes, okay. So Industry 4.0 is the Can you see my screen?
Yes, Matt, please carry
Okay.
on.
Okay, so I have just a two slide and 2-page talking about the first one is market drivers, why the company and manufacturers looking for Industry 4.0, what's the drivers and what's the market dynamics. And the other hand is what's our view about Industry 4.0. So talking about the market drivers, right? So if you look at there are lots of manufacturers, companies a couple years ago, they looking at Industry 4.0, really focus on the efficiency, in the shop floor efficiency, how to increase the productivity, resource utilization, mix more production, right? So this is the kind of a traditional entry point that most of our company look at the efficiency. The other hand, today we also talk about resilience, right? So how we have a resilient supply chain and manufacturing. And this will really touch into the agility, this topic, because when we look at like a consumer product industry, recently they sell the drinks or those essential product. And we look at, they try to reduce the SKU, reduce the SKU, right? Because they would like to fasten and increase the productivity in their shop floor. And the other hand is for those company, they also look at which product portfolio can provide more margins, more profits, right? So they can have a different strategy. It will all link together from the supply chain planning down to the manufacturing, down to the production. The other hand is the sustainability, right? We talk about people, worker safety, and also the compliance and also sustainable operations, social distance. So these are all kind of market drivers. And the other side is all the Industry 4.0 technology as enablers, right? We talk about cloud computing, 5G, big data, machine learning. So overall, these are the tool to support the left-hand side, those are market drivers. And quick look at the Industry 4.0 from SAP point of view, what's the future of productivity looks like? Of course, most of the case, we talk about Industry 4.0 start from smart factories, and these can cover discrete, both discrete and process industry. And most of our manufacturers start looking at how to do the shop floor automations, how to collect the machine data from the PLC or PC, and how we collect those big data and put into the machine learning to do the predictive quality. So this is the smart factories as the foundation to support this Industry 4.0. However, before we build a product, we need to think about when to build a product, how many to build a product, and where to build a product. And all these are linked together with our sales planning, sales forecast that we need to understand, have a visibility. Otherwise, the more we produce, the more we lost. And the other hand, before we build a product, all this product information coming from the R&D, coming from the design department. And during the design phase, they collect the data from the customer, the ideas, and then start the project and start to build the design the product. And there are lots of master data, BOM recipe in the design phase. And more important is how we synchronize those information from design to manufacturing, because there are lots of changes happen during these design to manufacturing phases. And after we build the product, we need to deliver. And today we heard about lots of bandwidth issues in the logistics side, right? How to do the better logistic planning, transportation management. So this is also really a big topic. And then we deliver the product to the customer, and then lots of customers think about transform their business model from selling product to selling services. So there are lots of topics like how we build a digital twin, how we use the IoT sensors to collect the machine data and use the machine learning to do the predictive maintenance, and then use the mobile devices to support our daily operation. And again, today we also talk about network, right? So typically we have our internal visibility, but there are lots of companies also think about how to get the visibility from the external partner. through the network. Because if you look at this value chain, there are lots of suppliers, design partner, logistics, third parties, logistic, and also service partners. So how we collaborate together and have a more visibility and to trigger the business insight and actions. Why we want to talk about these things? Because back to the business driver, back to the business goal, there are lots of business drivers coming from how we secure the revenue, how we reduce the cost, or maintain the cash flow, or increase another revenue stream. So none of these KPI can support by silo solution. So that is our the point of view. What Industry 4.0 can help is not just manufacturing. This is a design to operate to support all the manufacturing KPI in the place. So with that, I want to hand over back to Ansho, that we can have a more kind of experience from our customers and Carlos to share more kind of a detailed case study. Thank you, Ansho.
Thanks, Matt. So this is all more than smart factory, right? It's about delivering the customer experience, and thanks for sharing that big picture. So let's move on. We have an interesting case study from Varian Medicals, which I'll be discussing with Carlos and Senthil. Carlos, please tell us more about Varian Medical and what were the challenges, what has been your overall journey or experience with Industry 4.0 manufacturing?
We started more than 5 years ago with the manufacturing execution implementation. And should I share the PPT now, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, again, good afternoon and thanks for the opportunity. So as you said, we're here to talk about Varian Medical Systems and the implementation of our manufacturing execution system. A quick introduction to what's Varian. Varian is an oncology company, medical devices dedicated to cancer treatment. And I'm going to skip a few of these items, but this is part of our history. Born in 1937 with the production of a tube that is an amplifier for microwaves. Then after 10 years or 11 years, Varian Associates along with Stanford University is created. And then only after 30 years, it becomes a profitable company, right? Curious factor, in 1969, the Varian technology helps the men land on the moon. Then after that, it's all about improving how cancer is treated. So for example, in 81, we produce a machine that can operate at 2 different energy levels. What that means is that with the same machine, different types of cancer can be treated. And then after that, we're talking about full computer control, MLC, which means no repositioning of the patient. What you see on the right side is how the machine is the one that rotates, how the couch is the one that moves up and down. And then we created, or the company creates, the smart segmentation, and they actually win an award because of this, this kind of therapy. Then the TrueBeam in 2010, which is this machine that you see on the right side. It's all about robotic positioning, treatment planning, info management. In 2012, the company becomes the largest software provider. And in 2015, they start producing the Viral Beam, which is also a similar machine, but it's affordable. So what that means is that the company can reach more patients every year. And finally, 2 years ago, this new machine that it's an improved machine in every sense, right? It's more affordable, it can cure more types of cancer, etc. Now, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, the need for a manufacturing execution system is there, right? And why the company needs an MES? Well, because we were a medical device company with no manufacturing execution system. We were paper-based, so you can imagine how difficult it was to find the records for a machine in our warehouse of paper. We had multiple disconnected systems, Excel files, of course, a lot of paper. We had SAP back then, but not an advanced MES. And we needed a reliable device history report, right? Everything in one place, one click, being able to see the history of a machine. We needed top to bottom traceability. Sometimes we needed to know a lot of a particular material, where it was installed, or if a user was causing a problem with a machine, which machines or which assemblies the user was working on, etc. We needed process harmonization and automation, and we needed machine and data integration, and also we needed to transfer the data electronically between sites. That said, the challenges, back to your questions. Regulatory requirements. We have requirements from FDA or equivalent in other countries. Change management was a big challenge. People are used, and they like using their Excel files. They like using the paper. So change management was a big deal. Analyzing the top 3 MES products was not easy at first. There are very good products out there. So at the end, we decided that we were going to go with SAP MES, but it was a tough decision. During the implementation, being early adapters was a good experience, but it was also difficult because we were the ones to experience the system for the first time. And of course, we found some problems with the system, or just some functionality that was not working as we expected, or that was not there. Sometimes also the standard functionality, or as SAP calls it, the out-of-the-box functionality, was close to what we needed, but not quite there. So we needed to tweak things here and there, and in some cases we had to create our own transactions. Working with SAP has been nice, seeing the evolution from the first or the old version of SAP ME to the current version. We have seen how from having not many developers at the beginning, now you can find more developers. There were no APIs, there were no web services, or there were not many web services. Now all the APIs are exposed. There were some bugs with the system. The system was not stable, or not as stable as we needed it to be. We needed a system that was available 24/7. Now we're close to that. I have to say we went from SQL database to HANA database, and we saw an improvement in stability and also speed. And of course, we had some industry-specific or variant-specific functionality that was not there in the system. As I mentioned before, one of the needs we had was transferring the data between servers, between different plants, because our assemblies go from one plant to another. So transferring the data between servers was also a challenge. And finally, the limited partner choices. It was not easy at the beginning to find a good partner to do this implementation. So talking about our implementation partner, we decided to go with Readiness because they have a lot of experience with different manufacturing execution systems, but in particular with SAP ME. They have experience with machine integration, and they also have experience with interfacing with SAP ECC. And we have been together, as I said, for many years now. And I can say that today they can deliver high quality transactions. They deliver the transactions really fast, and the users are happier because the transactions are very friendly. Our implementation strategy, really quick. We have a template that we use across all plants. So the same functionality that we have in our plant in California is what we use in our plant in Germany. And that helps a lot with when it comes to support. With my guy in India can support someone in California, or vice versa. A person in California can support someone in UK. The way we do it is few work centers at a time and one plant at a time. No big bang. This is just how it has worked well for us. We always use agile methodology. We do not use waterfall. And what this allows is that sometimes we have a draft of the transaction, and we interact with the business owners or with the end users, and they provide feedback, and we make changes on the fly. For the type of system, I think this agile methodology is the best. And one tip, if you will, is for the first rollout that we did, we only cared about the ERP integration. We didn't care about anything else. So we were able to go live with out-of-the-box functionality, and the only tweaks we made were to the interface with our ERP system. And machine integration was left till the very end. 95% of the functionality is globally used. What that means is that the other 5% is either plant-specific or country-specific. One example, in Switzerland, we have a plant where they have a lot of third-party manufacturing. So that's that 5%. This is our footprint. Right now we have MES implemented in Palo Alto, California, Crawley in UK, Han in Germany, Baden in Switzerland, and Beijing in China. And there are plans to expand it to other plants like Seattle and Brazil. This is our SAP landscape. You can see how MES is just a very tiny, small portion of all the systems that we have. We are also on the latest version of SAP. We're on HANA 1909. And just talking about the system and how it has evolved during all these years, some of the custom solutions we have created along with RITS, what we call the Kanban solution. It is this screen that you see here. This allows the users to see how they are doing in terms of producing these different materials, if they need to start producing right away, if it's in process, or if they don't need to produce anymore right now. And what it does in the background is it creates a production order in our ERP system. It starts the serial number in the MES system, etc. What we call site-to-site, this is the electronic transfer of data between servers. There is no good picture for that, but if you're familiar with SAP and MES, we have an MES system where we have all the data for an assembly. We do a stock transfer order. We do a goods receipt in the receiving plant, everything in SAP. And then that's the signal for our receiving plant server, MES server, to transfer only the assembly data, only the genealogy of that assembly, not everything. We have this transaction, return and replace. What we have experienced in all these years is that reversals are not easy. One thing is going forward, going back is a lot harder, but we were able to create this transaction where we just have to enter the top level assembly. It explodes all the sub-assemblies, and we can replace or just remove any component. We were able to add some additional limitations inside the transaction. For example, not everyone can click every button, or not everyone can uncheck these boxes. So really nice transaction we created there. Our device history report, again, is multi-level, and it includes many sections. We can select which ones we want to see and which ones we are not interested in. We have it in 2 different languages, and we have a slim version, etc. And well, I'm gonna try to make it faster now. Just a few more examples of transactions we have in our system. Finally, this is a video. I'm not going to play all of it, but this is the machine integration we have. And we also receive feedback from this controller, from this tool, and we collect all the data. And you can imagine all the data mining and all this, the decisions we can make with all this data that we're collecting. And with that, I think I'm going to move on to Senthil.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So thanks, Carlos, for the detailed case study. Yeah, as he's described, it has been a long journey with Varian. So we have been in the market on the Industry 4.0 for the last 6 years, and we are primarily working with SAP, and we have our own shopware solutions with IOPC and IO Connect. And I'll just basically touch with other case studies. Maybe just next one could be a Lumax. Carlos, go to the next slide, please. The Lumax is one of the lighting industry solutions, so which is primarily using SAP landscape. We have enabled MEMI for their end-to-end supply chain tracking, bringing the Industry 4.0 solution over there through SAP ME. So primarily the objective for them is a gate-to-gate tracking and first in, first out, and they want to monitor energy utilizations and utilities and the genealogy. So these are all things which we delivered through SAP ME, and we put up a sensors connecting the data directly pushing to our HANA, and then we pick it up in ME for analyzing it over there and make the decisions and push back to the machines. So this case study was primarily did for India, and right now it is implemented in Ahmedabad plant. They are moving over towards another 2 or 3 more plants. And the benefits for the customers, they get real-time visibility, and they can monitor all the plants across the plant in the central hub, and reduced operational costs, driving the efficiencies and regulatory compliance. And their inventory visibility is like, where is my order, where is my inventory, who is using it, how long it is available. It reduces their planning cycle. It helps them the monitoring. It supports them on the cost after sales. So the next case study is going to be our Katera. Katera is using our MEMI solution for their wall building. So this is mainly a constructions company. So primarily we have enabled the solutions, and the next one is going to be our Asian Paints. So the Asian Paints is a complete process industry. So if you look at the product wise, okay, this is covers discrete, process, as well as the hybrid industry. So the solution covers almost all the places. In the Asian Paints, typically the challenge is like, okay, the sensor has to be integrated directly with their order management systems. Like when there is a tank full of paint and it has to be corrected based on the tank capacity. When there is a tank is lower level, then the order has to be triggered accordingly. So these are all things which is seamlessly integrated with the shop floor as well as to the top floor. This is what is our solution delivered. So with that, I'll hand it over to Anchal. So
thanks. Matt, if you can please share your slide. So coming from, discussing from the earlier sessions today and what Matt shared with us, the key takeaway is that Industry 4.0 is more than smart manufacturing. It's about how we connect everything digitally to bring a perfect operational reality. And with this real-time visibility, as Carlos was showing in his video, this real-time visibility means real-time management, real-time control. All of this is in the end to deliver a superior customer experience. So it's not just limited to automating the machines, digitizing the processes in the plant. It's about the big picture of how do we use Industry 4.0 to deliver ultimately a superior customer experience. Matt, if you can go to the next slide, please. So if you're interested in learning more, we do have an upcoming Industry 4.0 virtual sessions where we'll be going in detail in all sections of the supply chain. How do you deliver to the customer? And we have a link here where you can visit more on Industry 4.0 from SAP. Thanks a lot, everyone, Matt, Carlos, Senthil, for sharing your views. Over to you, Bert.
Yes, thank you so much, Anshal, for wrapping it up. Again, guys, if you're interested to learn more on SAP, they have a barcode there that you can just scan over. We are getting close to time, so I'm afraid we have to wrap up. But thanks to all our speakers and our moderator, Anshal, for taking us through the discussion. For our audience, do take a moment to provide feedback on this session and share your ideas for future topics with us. With time constraint, we won't be able to take in questions, but don't worry, our speakers will be addressing it on Interchange community platform, where you can still continue our conversations, interact with our participants, and join our discussion forums. Information on joining the Interchange is shown in the chat room and in an email that you will receive after this session. A link to a recording of today's entire webinar will also be posted on ITAP Connect website as well. Once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the Interchange and at future episodes of the ITAP Connect series. Thank you so much, guys, and for the speakers, thank you.